As more and more Pokemon are introduced, some will be forgotten amongst the crowd of standouts. It's hard to compare to the competitive success of a Garchomp, the iconic nature of Pikachu and Jigglypuff, and the hilarious designs like Tinkaton. Today, we will be taking a moment to give some respect to those Pokemon that are struggling not to be buried in the sands of time, and maybe preserve their memory just a bit further. We'll talk about the most forgotten Pokemon of each generation. One each, of course. And before we do so, I want to specify that forgotten and underrated are two different things. While there are reasons for both, Pokemon that are forgotten for usually pretty good reasons. Meanwhile, underrated is having value that no one seems to have explored. Forgotten Pokemon are either completely irrelevant or just mediocre enough that no one remembers them for even being bad, much less good. This video is less Mystic gushes about a Pokemon he thinks deserves love, and more, wow, this poor guy can't catch a break. Let's hear why. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's begin. Also, Mystic reads. Yes, the coveted pure water typing that bulky waters have a tendency to enjoy. Vaporeon, Milotic, Palafin, Wishiwashi, and Suicune are all some pretty notable examples of this typing, all of which have good bulk, and some of which have a solid enough offense to not be a completely passive wall. When you think of pure water, it's safe to assume these guys, and perhaps Blastoise and Feraligatr come to mind. Actually, with the amount of pure waters in the game, it's not hard to think about them. Or even the ones that aren't particularly good at all, whose being bad is a joke. Like Luvdisc. Not only is Luvdisc so bad it's laughable, but still has the niche of being a great target for Thief so you can grind for heart skills. Now, where's this going, you're probably wondering? Well, simple. Imagine not just being pure water, but a pure water fish. What's the first fish you think of? Barraskewda probably? Magikarp perhaps? Definitely not Seaking, right? Seaking is a victim of what I'm going to refer to as Pokédex filler. Game Freak really didn't know what to do when they were making it, nor did they know what role it could possibly fill. Not to mention, I'm currently under the belief that with how silly Generation 1 is, it was not meant to be played seriously or competitively, despite how fascinating Gen 1 OU turned out to be. And this is why Seaking has nothing to work with, and it's not something they ever really cared to change. After all, why focus on Seaking? It's just another random water type, and there are a lot of water types. Just catch it so you can complete the Pokédex. If you're trying to win, use Gyarados, Blastoise, or Tentacruel. Maybe they'll give it a buff later down the line? I mean, technically it has Swift Swim, Lightning Rod, and Water Veil, and those are all good. The stats just don't back it up. And if you want a swift swimming fish, you've had that option since Generation 3 when Gorebyss was introduced. Yeah, by the time the supposed Seaking had any ounce of a niche, it was already outclassed. It isn't even just outclassed by Pokemon either. Deep Seaking, which is just the cooler Seaking, had more impact in one episode of One Punch Man than Seaking did in the entirety of Pokemon's existence. Unless there's like some niche anime episode where it did something cool and I missed it. Heck, its design is also forgettable, especially compared to all the other fish. Now, I didn't know whether or not to put this guy on this list because it, by all accounts, has had a type change, and therefore it got remembered at some point. But that was the last meaningful buff it ever got, and that was a long time ago at this point. And when all the normal types got cool type changes to Fairy, I'm pretty sure people were more excited about Clefable and Togekiss. And don't even get me started on Azumarill, going from a pretty okay Pokemon to making its home in OU. I don't particularly think many people cared when Granbull got that fairy buff, unless you were a Gen 6 RU player, in which case, good for you actually. I hear Granbull was pretty good there, alongside Alomomola. It's Alomomola, Mystic. Jeez. I guess every dog has its day. Look, I didn't want it to be Granbull either. But as I looked over Generation 2, I noticed that Gen 2 introduced a lot of Pokemon that were very memorable, or Pokemon that were forgettable until Game Freak themselves eventually remembered them again. Girafarig was going to be on this list, and then it got an evolution to make people remember it. Dunsparce was always a funny pick, and now there's even more of it. Yeah, they made Wyrdeer a mount in Legends Arceus. Sunflora and Ladian will always be remembered for being bad. Unknown are the building blocks of the universe the last time I checked, and they also have an entire mini subplot around them in the Runes of Alph. Granbull has none of this. It kind of just exists. It has coverage moves, it has a strong play rough, it has high attack and HP, with Intimidate and Assault Vest or leftovers for decent bulk, even Taunt and Heal Bell. But the unfortunate thing about Granbull is that back when it was normal, there was an even cooler normal type introduced in the same gen who people liked, being Ursaring. And another Legends Arceus evolution. Wow, that is just sad. And now that it's a fairy, it's gonna compete for the spotlight with Azumarill, who was introduced in the same game. Maybe one day they'll make, I don't know, Granderbull or something, and then people will finally acknowledge it. The last two Pokemon I had things to say about. They have lore or history, or at least something to jab and poke fun at. Chimecho just makes me sad. Well, I guess I consider Chingling to be the 10th strongest baby Pokemon in a video that you should all totally go watch. But Chimecho itself, this Pokemon is a massive yikes. Its design doesn't stand out, and even in the game it's introduced in, there is a massively more popular Psychic type that you can catch much earlier, and with much better stats once it hits level 30 and can finally do something. Yeah, I guess Chimecho is on average more physically bulky than Gardevoir, but that's never gonna come up when Gardevoir is faster, has better special attack, has better special bulk, and could Mega Evolve for 2 generations straight. But maybe comparing it to Gardevoir is rude. Surely Chimecho is at least the second most standout Psychic type in Gen 3, right? Wrong. It's Medicham, who also could Mega Evolve. Man, Game Freak's cruelty is boundless here, huh? They're just rubbing salt in the wound. Chimecho isn't even better than Grumpig, nor will it ever live up to Claydol. And this is me neglecting to mention, this is the same generation that introduced Latios, Latias, Deoxys, and Jirachi. It's gonna be hard to remember you when you're the worst of your type with the least standout design among a bunch of other Psychic types. To rub salt in the wound even further, Tate and Liza, the Psychic Pokemon gym leaders, never use it. I looked it up, and on their rematch teams, they use Slowpoke. Base Slowpoke. But not Chimecho. Actually, now that I think on it, Solrock and Claydol exist. That's like 10 Psychic types or something that have all been introduced in the same gen as Chimecho. When you're this overcrowded with Psychic types, no wonder there's gonna be a run to the litter. Ah yes, the coveted pure water typing that bulky waters have a tendency to enjoy. Vaporeon, Milotic, Palafin... Wait, haven't I done this before? I don't seem to remember why I put this on here twice. Did Game Freak even introduce a pure water type in Gen 4? Kinda forgot. Oh. Yeah. You. Yeah, I guess I can see why I forgot about you. Says here you have no outstanding traits. Huh. Storm Drain? We have Gastrodon. Waterville? No one really plays that ability. Swift Swim? We have a lot of those. And your stat spread doesn't seem to particularly stand out either. Honestly, now that I think about it, I do remember actually having to catch you to complete the Scarlet and Violet Pokedex. Man, honestly, I think it's worse knowing that they put you in the same Pokedex as Gyarados twice now. First in Gen 4, and then in Gen 9. Look, I'm sure you have some sort of unique set you can do. Rain Dance, U-Turn, and Tailwind are solid support, but it's not like you'll be making use of those with minuscule attacking stats like that. I'm just not impressed. Speaking of Pokemon that make a return in Gen 9, and yet you still have a hard time remembering they exist outside of the occasional one-off encounter with them, we have Cryogonal. Cryogonal is one of those Pokemon that, in my opinion, isn't even bad as much as it is just something that's hard to remember. It has a unique design, and it has solid stats, including 105 speed, 95 special attack, 135 special defense, and 80 HP, making it a specially defensive Pokemon while keeping it somewhat offensive. Sure, 50 defense is physically frail, and that will be a pain for it, but at least it has a few good stats to compensate. Levitate is good too, for what it's worth. It even has Freeze Dry, Rapid Spin, Recover, and Knockoff, which are excellent moves. So why is it forgotten, despite access to even the rare Freeze Dry? I don't particularly know. This feels like an anomaly. If I were to guess, probably because Gen 5 as a whole introduced a lot of memorable Pokemon, including 2 other pure ice types in Beartic and Vanillux, who went to take the attention away from it by being overall better Pokemon. It's one of those situations where it has the tools it needs, but it doesn't make good enough use of those tools in comparison to other Pokemon of its type. Man, that actually really stinks now that I think about it. I wish it could have more of an impact. This is another biased one from my end. But before I really knew what did and didn't constitute as a good Pokemon in battle, I believed firmly in Barbaracle. Tough Claws gave it stronger contact moves, and Shell Smash turned it into a demon on my Generation 6 teams. Yet, I'm pretty sure I'm one of the only people I've ever met who has said the name Barbaracle, because I don't think I've ever seen another person use it. Why not? Well, probably because there are a kajillion better Shell Smash users, like Cloyster, Gorobus, and Blastoise, and also because Water and Rock is not a complementary typing. Not to mention, Generation 6 didn't put much spotlight on Barbaracle. It was the ace of Seabold's team in X and Y, and that's the only time we ever see it unless we go out of our way to evolve Binacle. It really doesn't help that when you're a water type, which there are plenty of, that means your competition is incredibly extensive for the spotlight. Doesn't help that in Generation 6, people were more hyped about Megas, which did take attention off of a pretty good chunk of Generation 6's short list of new Pokemon. I also don't think I've seen it in a single Pokedex since it was released. I'm not even sure if Binacle or Barbaracle was in Sun and Moon, let alone Sword and Shield. Game Freak forgot that there was a 2-stage water and rock type because they proceeded to introduce Choodle and Dreadnought to completely replace Binacle and Barbaracle. Of course, they also have Shell Smash. It's cruelty at its finest. This just can't be me, right? Surely nobody else remembers Komala, right? It has been many years and I still do not know what it does. I mean, I guess it was on Larry's team in Scarlet and Violet, but it was sharing a team slot with the Dunsparce and Staraptor. So unless you found a way to struggle with the Komala, you probably forgot it was there. Comatose is a unique ability and all, and that's neat, especially since it is a physical attacker that can't be burned, paralyzed, or poisoned. But unless you're playing some specifically gimmicky Komala, where you've Terra Normaled and then hit Rapid Spin Boost to boost your speed and last resort for your damage, I don't really see why you're playing it compared to the many other normal type options. Don't get me wrong, it has good moves, it has some pretty okay stats, but among the many normal types in Pokemon, there are flashier designs and better options. Not to mention, in the Alola games alone, there are tons of flashier Pokemon. When there's the Ultra Beasts, new Alola forms, the Island Guardians, a bunch of crazy designs, and then Beware, just to add insult to injury, it's hard to really remember Komala as a Pokemon, unless you just really like koalas. And that's fine. I like koalas too. I'll be honest, Generation 8, despite the mixed feelings towards it, had some pretty standout designs. Cramorant is one of the funniest looking things I've ever seen. The internet went rabid over Wooloo for a decent few months. The fossils were all pretty insane, and Yamper is one of the single most precious Pokemon I've seen in my life. You know who I forgot existed until I had to look up what was introduced in Sword and Shield? Silicobra and Sandaconda. They did these two Pokemon dirty. Sandaconda is a neat design, but the issue of Sandaconda is that for some reason, Game Freak saw it fit to put the Pokemon with the niche Sand Setter ability in the same game as Tyranitar and Hippowdon. Yeah, that will totally get people to use the new ground type who has to get hit for its ability Sand Spit to proc, rather than setting it on entry. Of course, they didn't stop there in making sure nobody ever batted an eye on Sandaconda. I'm gonna put its stats on the screen for everyone to see, right? And then right next to it, I'm gonna put Hippowdon's. Yes, that is correct. Game Freak made a pure ground type, gave it eerily similar but basically worse stats than Hippowdon with a worse Sand Setter ability in the exact same game, and then expected us to notice the snake when the big hippo is right there. I don't know why they expected that to work, or did they expect it at all? Maybe this was all on purpose to bolster Hippowdon's popularity. Maybe there's an agenda at play. And then of course, Shedskin is an okay ability at best. And Sandveil is an incredibly odd choice for a hidden ability. I get it. It makes sense. It's a sand snake hiding in the sand. But I just don't like it. This was probably the hardest one to talk about because Scarlet and Violet introduced a lot of memorable Pokemon. I can probably remember every Pokemon in this game if I think hard enough. There were some that aren't as memorable on paper, but then you fight them as Titans like Bombirdier and Cloth. I want to say Oinkologne, but odds are people remember it because they probably had Lechonk on their team at the start of the game, because I remember there being some hype around the little piggy. I want to say Veluza, but Kofu literally yells Volton Veluza, and it's also on Gita's team. So even if they aren't memorable on their own, you see them, you encounter them, and their recent Pokedex additions. So it's hard to forget them. Do you see the issue I'm having? There are either banger designs, Pokemon with mandatory battles, or the usual wow that's bad Pokemon like Spidops. If I were to take a guess involving a Pokemon I'm pretty sure not many people talk about or seem to remember, I'm gonna guess Robska. And even then, that's cherry picking. I don't even know if Robska deserves to be the guy. It has Revival Blessing. And is it truly being forgotten to begin with if no one ever knew you existed? What do I mean by that? Well, simply put, no one likes Rellor, last I checked. I don't think I've met many Rellor fans, or people who used it on their team. So, if no one used it, odds are people only evolved Rellor because they were interested in Revival Blessing, which Pawmot also gets, and has Terra Electric Double Shock to keep you looking at it and away from Rellor. That, or they evolved it to complete the dex and then boxed it. So Robska is kind of on here by default more than it is because it's actually forgotten. Out of all the Pokemon introduced, this one is just the one that stands out the least, and that feels the least likely to be used, if that makes any sense. No plot-relevant battle with it, no initiative to catch Rellor, other than curiosity as to what it turns into. It's too slow to make Revival Blessing a worthy use, and has two very mediocre abilities. So odds are you probably opted out of using it competitively when you could just have a faster Revival Blessing user that can Volt Switch out of a bad matchup, or forego Revival Blessing altogether just to keep punching you with Double Shock and Terra Electric. So, is it forgotten or just overshadowed? I say both. And that's what I believe to be the most forgotten Pokemon of every current generation. What do you think? Am I wrong? Is there a Pokemon that I actually forgot about that is so forgotten that makes this list inaccurate? What do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching my content. With Scarlet and Violet DLC on the way, we have a lot to be excited for. Not just that though, but I've got a bunch of other cool series planned throughout the year that I'm sure you guys will love. If you want to support my other forms of content, over on Mystic Reads, I read fanfics. One of them right now is Road to be a Pokemon Master Kanto Edition, where Ash and Serena start from the very beginning and journey through Kanto together. On Mystic Umbreon Shorts, I do other exclusive Pokemon content such as Pokemon Facts, and on Saturdays I upload my top 5 favorite Pokemon of a type. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an excellent day.